Morning, everybody. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I think now's a good time to get started. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this day. For those of you that aren't in Calgary, I look out my window and it's just starting to snow again. I thought it was going to be a nice day, so that's kind of depressing. But we're here to talk about something kind of exciting. Well, actually, I think really exciting. My name is John Brown. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape, and I want to welcome you to our school. Weird thing to say, but that's the way COVID is. And also introduce Barry Wylant, Professor Barry Wylant, who is our Graduate Program Director and is the manager of the Doctor of Design program. What we're going to do today is I've got a short slide deck. We can't have an open house without a slide deck to just kind of talk a little bit about our program, provide a bit more context, and then we'll spend most of the time answering questions and having an open discussion. So it's great to see you all, and I will share my screen and we will get started. So for those of you that may not be familiar with the University of Calgary School of Architecture, we take a very specific role or strategy for our design education. It is designed to be community-based, impactful. It's about changing the world, and we do that through our graduate programs. We don't have an undergraduate degree stream within our school. We're purely graduate, and we have planning, landscape architecture, and architecture. And the DDES, the current group of 7 Doctor of Design candidates that started this fall, there are 2 landscape architects. There's a planner who is a senior planner at the City of Calgary. We have, that's 2, 3, we've got 3 architects, one from Toronto, one from Edmonton. One of our landscape architects is in Vancouver, and then we have an industrial designer who's gone into the technology space and is coming back into this. And so, really, what we're interested in is changing the world. We're looking at the future of city building. The University of Calgary just recently announced that it was going to concentrate on 4 specific themes moving forward: health, energy, advanced technology, and city building, which is a massive thing for us. And so the Doctor of Design fits right inside that. The other piece that defines the University of Calgary is entrepreneurial thinking. And so for entrepreneurial thinking isn't just about startups in a garage to make an app. In our world, it's around disrupting the status quo. And I haven't really met a designer who isn't interested in disrupting the status quo. And so that really is exactly aligned. This notion about innovation and entrepreneurial thinking is totally aligned with the core reason why most of us got into these design disciplines in the first place. And the Doctor of Design degree is really set up to help mid-career professionals to better achieve those larger goals. And really what we're here is to transform your practice. This is probably, you saw this as a card or as an advertisement somewhere. Really what we're here to do is to help you transform your practice. You know that as you know, in practice, I'm a practicing architect. I've got an active research or active professional life. consulting is very transactional. You get a client, you get a commission, you do the job, you answer their question, and off you go. During that time, though, I've observed that most thoughtful practitioners have an observation. They say, gee, if I could just have a little bit more time, I could explore this. I've done 5 of these projects. I think there's a better way. I think there's a better way of managing my office, about setting up a project, about a new kind of material, a new kind of process, whatever that might be. But how in the spirit of the transactional world of consulting do you ever find the time to do that? So the Doctor of Design, we set this up. It works in parallel and in concert with your current practice. So you remain embedded in your practice. It's something that you do in addition to your work. And it allows you, it gives you the mental space and the assistance through a kind of studio review process with your supervisor, your peers, and with panels of experts that we bring in to nurture those ideas and then implement them and test them in your practice as you go. I took a similar program to this at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in 2012. After 25 years in practice, I wanted to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And so I went there with an open mind about some ideas, and I graduated in 2016, and it completely transformed my practice. And as I was working through the pieces, I was constantly testing it with clients and seeing it. Part of my dissertation was a project that we completed, a house, and then it went on to completely renovate my practice, and we've kind of shifting away from our old model of practice and launching a new one. So what does it mean? What does a Doctor of Design mean? Why isn't it a PhD? So a doctoral degree for practicing design, we want to build on the recognized expertise that you've developed in a specific topic and area and elevate your career to a new level. So in a regular PhD program, you would enter that right after coming out of your master's degree, say in science or whatever. You don't really have a lot of experience. So you need to spend a couple of years developing that disciplinary expertise before you can do your research. You've developed that already through your years in practice. And so you already have that disciplinary expertise. So you can, after taking, a first couple of courses, you're able to delve directly into your research and look at how you can use that to elevate your career and take that to a new level. So really there's 3 words that we use to describe it. It's relevant. The research that you're doing needs to be relevant, it needs to be applied, and it needs to be impactful. If you're going to take time out of your busy schedule and your life and all that at this point in your career to come back to school, it better be worth it. It better be something that it's not just a quote unquote academic exercise. It's not something that you write and you publish and you put on your shelf and you get to say you're a doctor and then, that's it. This is something that's meant to be meaningful. It's meant to be meaningful to you, to your practice, and to the world. So there's 2 ways in which you can do that. There's innovation of things and innovation of ways. Innovation of things has to do with creating thinking about more typically the things that we do as designers, right? I'm going to design a building, I'm going to think about a landscape. Innovation of ways is, as the name implies, not about a physical thing, but about processes. Planning is probably the area where that's closest, but it applies equally in the other disciplines where it might be a new practice model. It might be a new way of integrating other disciplines into your work. It might be a new way of community engagement. It might be a new way in which you add value to your current services in an innovative way so that you're providing a better service, generating more revenue. All of those things are possible. But at the bottom, as I said at the beginning of this, it's about disrupting the status quo. How are we going to do things in a better way? And I've got to say that at this moment in time, if we can't start disrupting the status quo where we've got climate change, social inequity, and a pandemic, where all of those things have to do with cities, they have to do with the built environment. The solutions that society needs in all 3 of those areas are directly related to what we're doing. If we can't figure that out, then we've got a much bigger problem as disciplines. This is our moment, and this Doctor of Design degree is an opportunity to be able to activate on those things, which is, as I said, entrepreneurial thinking. So what's the difference between a PhD and a DDES? It's a kind of arbitrary, like this isn't, you're not going to look it up in Wikipedia and find this, but it's the way we use to describe the difference. So both of them are about generating new knowledge. And that's the key piece. If you think about when you did your master's training or your bachelor's degree, you're really learning new skills that you then go out and apply. In a PhD, the goal is to actually generate something new, something that the discipline has not seen before. It could be an innovation of things or an innovation of ways. And that contribution to new knowledge is what defines a doctoral degree. Other than that, it's basically nomenclature. In a PhD, typically, and certainly within our program, we do have an active PhD program, you're thinking about scientific-based inquiry. You're going to pose a question, you're going to gather data, you're going to follow a method, you develop a methodology, gather data, analyze the data, draw conclusions, and that conclusion is your contribution to new knowledge. And that's great. And if what your question is really would be attuned to that, where there's a lot of quantitative measurement and analysis, then a PhD is probably a better course for you. DDES, on the other hand, is really for everybody else. And there isn't a lot of that scientific-based inquiry within the kind of meat and potatoes of what we do as architects, planners, and landscape architects. We certainly use scientific inquiry for certain things, or particularly around technical disciplines, the technical side of our disciplines. But the DDES is new because it's about design-based inquiry. It's about using the philosophy of design-based inquiry, design-based approach to the world to generate new knowledge. So a PhD typically is academic focused. It's something that again, is set up historically over the last 100 years to train people to be academics. Now, a lot of people going into PhD programs right now don't go into academia, but they're being trained in that way of thinking. Whereas the DDES is very practice focused. It's practical. It's how are you going to use this time to generate new knowledge that you can apply directly into your world, and then also share that at some level so that it expands the discipline. It uses a work-integrated research methodology. So in a PhD, it's full-time. You leave your practice, you leave your world, you come back to school. It's a big deal to do that, and that's why most people do that at the beginning of their career. This is something that we use, the work-integrated methodology, because your lab is your practice. It's where you're working right now. It's where you can do experiments, where you take an idea that you've developed and you try it, and you see what it's like in your practice, and then you bring it back. And so it is separate from your practice in that it's not, you can't just do a project that you're doing in the office, but the projects become examples, they become case studies, they become research experiments in a way for this other question that you are interested in that's broader than any one particular problem. And it builds on the tacit knowledge that you have that comes from that deep professional experience and your unique personal insights. And you may say, oh, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you'd be surprised when you sit down with your cohort for the first class in September and you start to talk about what everybody has done. Everybody takes their first professional degree into different directions, and you've developed a passion, an expertise, an idea. Maybe you've already done that like me when I went through it and said, I'm done with that, I want to do something else, but I want to take the skill sets that I've had and apply it in a new direction. All of that's fine, but it's critical that it's basing it on what your experiences are. So what do I mean by that? So in a regular PhD, if the grade lines are your career, you kind of do a stop out where you do your PhD, and it does elevate your practice up what you're doing to a new level. With the DDES, it's something where there's a continuity of practice all the way through, but that even during the DDES, what I found in my experience is that you're elevating your practice almost from the beginning, because you're taking the discoveries that you're making, the observations, the conversations with your supervisor and your cohort and the panel reviewers to change what you're doing. It's like back in the day, we use a studio crit model where you stand up and you present and you get feedback. And you remember in school how valuable that was, right? And it wasn't just what your instructor said, it's what everybody else said about your work that also was insightful. So we have that. And so then when you graduate, then you're actually making a kind of double jump up in what kind of value you can bring to that. So this is what the curriculum looks like. It typically we're planning that it takes 3 years. You'll notice that there's those dots. Every 6 months we have a symposium where it's over a long weekend where everybody gets together. This year it's going to be on Zoom, but we're hoping very soon that it will be in person. Everybody gets together and everybody presents. They each have an hour. They present for 20 to 30 minutes, and then they get 30 to 40 minutes of feedback. The supervisors are there. In the first courses, the instructors are there, which are Barry and I. And then we also bring in a panel of experts. So you have 3 panel members on your review panel, and you present where you are, very honestly, where you are in the project. In the first one, which is going to be in about 2 weeks right from now, all the students are grappling with the problem. What is the problem they're going to solve? And it's really interesting because people apply with a research proposal, and the proposal invariably is solution-oriented. Why? Because that's what we're taught to do as professionals, right? We have solutions to problems. This is different. A DDES is an opportunity to define your problem. And so we've been spending the first fall term recalibrating what it is that what actually is the problem that you're trying to disrupt. What are the ways and what really are the drivers to those problems, rather than it just being the first solution out of your or assumption right out of the gate. So that's what we'll be doing, and they'll be presenting that work and getting feedback from people around the world that we bring in to distinguish academics, practitioners, critical thinkers to look at that. And we try and curate the research panel so that in every case, one of those 3 people is particularly interested in and has a contribution to your specific question, your specific project, and then the other 2 are from other teams that are there and provide more general feedback. That's really important, because what you're doing is it is specific, but it's also disrupting the status quo of the world, right, and of practice in general. And so there's a lot, it's good to get that specific feedback, but also to get more general feedback that comes out of left field that says, well, hey, have you thought about this? Maybe, and at the same time, you're getting feedback from all of your peers. What we found is that because we're having our classes on Zoom, that the 7 students that are in this year's cohort are actually working well together, because they're all practitioners. They all have their own deep life experience and can speak very eloquently to all of the projects because they can provide their own feedback. So we meet every 6 months, and the first fall and winter term, fall term, there's 2 courses. So you're really you're working on your project, but you're working on it in the context of a course that meets weekly. And at the end of those 2 courses, you'll have your first chapter of your dissertation, which is the problem. And then you'll start in winter on the research. The 3rd course is really a kind of research facilitation. We meet regularly. We're not adding new content. All we're doing is workshopping your project to help you get kind of started. And then after that is clearly research. The 2 yellows are gate posts. The first one, candidacy, is when you have to present your research proposal. As part of the symposium, and so there's a kind of review process that is part of our university process, and then finally the defense is on the Symposium 6. So as we build out, we're just in our first year now. Hopefully all of you will, or some of you at least, will be in our 2nd cohort, and you'll be in 2nd year, or first year, the other group will be in 2nd. By the time when you're in 2nd year, those first year people will be graduating, and they will be giving their dissertation during the symposium. So the first day of the symposium are the defenses, and then we go backwards from year 3 to year 2 to year 1, so that you get to see what everybody's doing around you. And the expectation, or the hope is is that you participate in all of those, provide that kind of feedback, and then if you're interested, then, you know, after you graduated, you come back as a review panel member, and it kind of build up this culture within Canada of innovation and disruption within our industry, where it's so ripe for something like that. So here's the details. It's pretty straightforward. And Jen, who's also on the call, Jennifer Taylor, will be able to will work with you on any of these things. It's pretty straightforward. Deadline is February 1st, 2021. I highly recommend that if you are thinking about making an application, or even if you're just considering it, to set up a private call with either Barry or myself, or both of us. We'll see what the volume of calls is. I really like to have a chance to meet with all of our candidates as they're preparing their application, where we basically just talk about what your research project is and what your passions are, and I can help shape the sorts of you know, thinking around that, and also just give you a sense of my opinion and Barry's opinion as well about, you know, is this a DDES project? Is it a PhD project? Is there something, you know, something there? And we'll be really honest about all of that. So that's my spiel. Hopefully, yeah, I only took 20 minutes, so that's good. We've got lots of time for questions, and I see on a few familiar names. Darcy, really nice to see you, or not to see you, but to see your name. And I don't see everybody on my list because I've got a small screen, but it's great. Oh, and Eric, nice to see you as well. So anyway, we'll open it up for questions, and I'll, Barry, did you want to say something before we open it up?
I think just, I just wanted to augment one point about the idea of application of knowledge, and just to note that the opportunity within the degree is to pursue a rigorous and thoughtful pursuit of that application, that it's not necessarily the rote application of software or that type of thing, that the idea of application is that it finds traction within your practice, and in the way and the reflection that you can bring to that practice, and the rigor and perhaps following through on that notion of application.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Barry. So what's the process, Nicola, Jen, what's the process for questions? Do people just turn on their mic and speak?
Yeah, we can do it that
All right.
way.
Who'd like to go first? Somebody's got to have a question.
I have a question.
Yeah, Leanne.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. Priyanka, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
So I wanted to know whether the research theme needs to be within the 4 areas that you mentioned, or okay, good.
No, that was just the that's at the university level, at the highest university level. So each one of those are transdisciplinary. I just put it out there to demonstrate that the University of Calgary has a demonstrated commitment to city building as one of its research foci, and we're contributing to that. But it can be any topic within the creative design discipline. I talk about it as architecture, planning, and landscape, but as you can see this year, we have an industrial designer. We've had some interest from interior designers. We actually had a construction professional from Vancouver applied and was admitted for this year, but then took a deferral because of COVID, who has been working in one of the large global construction firms in their climate change space and innovative construction, and had a super interesting, doesn't have a design degree, but has that deep experience in construction, and we are very excited to have him. He'll be coming in the fall of this year. He took a 1-year deferral. Right. And did you have a question?
I
did. Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to augment that really the research pursuit emanates out of one's practice. It's something that comes about because you've noticed a pattern or a trend, perhaps in the way some of your projects have unfolded, or in some of the ways that projects or relationships with clients have unfolded. And so there is that opportunity, and that typically leads to the idea of innovation in ways that John discussed earlier. But it could also be, we could have a thing, right? Like there could be this new way of approaching practice relative to construction techniques, relative to technology, a whole variety of other different sorts of things. So I think it's really, really important that it's not necessarily constrained by those themes, but rather, as John pointed out, that the city building is a wide context that can allow design inquiries such as those from the DDES to really flourish.
That's right. Now, Leanne, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. It was really informative and gave me a better sense of the intent of the program. I did want to ask a question about university resources that would be available to the candidates or the participants in the program. Knowing that you've already talked about an academic supervisor, you've talked about the cohorts as being resources, and you've talked about expert panels. But if a particular problem requires sort of additional access to university resources, can you tell me how that works and whether it's possible and when that might be and how that might be?
So are you talking about like people resources, like other people from other disciplines?
Possibly, yes, that's a big part of it. Maybe you can describe, based on the University of Calgary as well, what sort of access to a library and resource materials through that. So that those both levels are important, and I was just curious about how you would see that working.
Yeah, so you're a student of the, you're a full-time student at the University of Calgary, even though there is no residency requirement and you're based in your practice. Your lab is the way that we explain it to our university administrators. So you have access to all of the library resources that every student does. So which now the need to actually physically go somewhere physically go to a library isn't as important, but you have access to, through your university registration to all of the publications, because you don't have to, pay for to see periodicals and journal entries and all of that. It's all included, and so that's there. And then if there was, say, if you were doing something that required a specific expertise, either really formally or informally, we can add a faculty member from social work, for example, or sociology or psychology to either the supervisory committee or just informally as part of a working team on the project. The one caveat, I suppose, is just to make sure that it's a design-based inquiry rather than another. But we collaborate deeply with people, with academics and programs all across the university. And one of the reasons that the university identified city building as one of its focus going forward is that we have a deep expertise in it across every discipline within the university, or at least within every faculty. We've been collaborating with the Institute for Public Health for a number of years, social work as well around social vulnerability, engineering, obviously, real estate through business. So there's a lot of interest, and by the university stating that city building was one of their foci, we're declaring that interdisciplinary kind of collaboration is of key importance.
Just
other questions?
Just to quickly add to that, John, The library, actually, as a student of Calgary, as a student at the University of Calgary, you would have full access to the library. And one of the things that's really helpful with that is the online access. So there's a number of journals and books, publications, etc., that are readily available online. So again, you don't necessarily have to be in Calgary to access that, but it is an extremely helpful resource that's available to you in developing this.
John, we have a question in the chat from Mina.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So. Yeah. So you said, yeah. So should we submit our proposal at the time of application or at the end of first year? Both. So you submit your research proposal, which is really a proposal, like a proposal for the proposal. Let's put it that way. This is what I'm interested in. This is my background. This is why I think it's important. It can really be a question. Like, in a sense, I think what we should really be asking is a problem proposal more than the research, because the research is proposing a kind of solution space where really we want to be talking about the problem space. And so, you know, this is my background. This is what I've observed while I've been in practice. I think that would be interesting to explore. You don't obviously have all the answers, because if you did, then it wouldn't be the generation of new knowledge. And then in that first year, we go through a process to help you clarify what that is, so that then you're really making your, you know, you've laid out a roadmap for what it is that you want to do in the next 2 years at the end of that, at that candidacy point. So that's really that's where it kind of all comes together. Although, because it's a design-based inquiry, you always have the opportunity to adjust things, right? Just in the same way as we're designing a building, the design of the building at the last minute there might be a piece that changes quite fundamentally because of an observation or something that's gone on, and so that is completely acceptable within this framework. The goal is at the end of the 3 years, that your dissertation and your contribution to new knowledge is impactful and relevant and useful to you and to your discipline. And so you shouldn't feel constrained in that. Hope that helps. Darcy, no, there are no other elective courses. The 2 to 3 required courses are really there to help facilitate you with your expertise. And this is the key issue. I mean, you're free to take an additional course if you want to. But really the point of this is that you are coming into this program with all of the required tacit knowledge already embedded in with what you need. As opposed to the PhD, because in a PhD or a master's degree, that's why there are electives and required courses, and you have to take these things in order to build up knowledge. You're not building up knowledge we don't think that it's necessary. It's not absolutely necessary to build up new knowledge in the DDes. There are literature reviews, and there are case study precedents, and learning about your context and your community of practice and what everybody else is doing, and are there examples of similar strategies and approaches, solution spaces in other areas that you could apply as an analogy, in the same way that you would apply to a design project to what you're doing. If, on the other hand, there was something really specific, like let's say you're interested in mass timber or something, and you wanted to do that, then that becomes part of your program, but it's not required. Can you elaborate on the terms between the 6 dots? Oh, yeah. So your work is happening in parallel to your practice. So, you know, I have found that the workload for this, aside from the very first term, where you're trying to sort out your problem and you're meeting weekly with your cohort for 2 hours, and the last term where you're writing, it's about the same amount of commitment as a job in your office. You know, if you're a principal, or you're running a job project manager, and you're running, 3, 4, 5 jobs. It's about that kind of commitment. It's something that it doesn't take over your entire life, but it's something that you'll be thinking about all the time. And this is the key piece. So although you might not be, sitting and writing and drawing and that sort of thing specifically around or reading around the Doctor of Design all the time, or every day, or every week, you're thinking about and applying just naturally, because if you have a genuine problem that you're interested in, it would be naturally engaged in your work, or you would be thinking about it in your work. You then start to apply it. So for example, maybe to give you a really tangible example, I went because we have a residential practice, Darcy knows that, called House Brand, and I was interested in how do you create, is it possible to create a house that would adapt as the needs of a family change, so that they don't build the house of their dreams and then 5 or 10 years later move because it shifts. And so ours was about how do we change the nature of residential construction so that it becomes adaptable. And so I started right from basically in the second term of my studies, started applying some of those strategies into my practice, just tiny little experiments to see it, tested it with clients, and tried a detailing experience around the closets to see if it was possible to do something. And so you are constantly experimenting, so that there is always a boundary between what you're doing, because it's not a project in the office that you're working on with a client, but it's a project in your office. The project is your office at some level, right? And I hope that explains it.
Also to add to that, John, there was another question from Simon about providing examples of previous proposals. And so just to give you a quick overview, one of the architects in our program this year has done a lot of work with acoustics within more institutional buildings, and is really interested in understanding the impact of acoustics in other types of building types, such as residential and that sort of thing. And so taking a look at various ways of incorporating, if you will, a skill set that may be seen to be operating in a more specific circumstance, perhaps in a more broader application across their practice. Others are looking at ways of how to market and position themselves. We have the industrial designer is very much looking at some of the tools of innovations like incubators and that sort of thing, and what their potential role could be in fostering innovation within a given region, such as Calgary. So there's some really interesting kinds of ideas in terms of how people are sort of recognizing patterns or recognizing certain phenomena that happens within their practice or certain pieces of knowledge, and then how to perhaps build that as a focus and as an expertise for their practice.
That's right. Yeah. So the acoustic example is interesting because it's kind of everyday acoustics. And how do you do something? How could you start to think about acoustics not as, we're going to hire an acoustician and do all of that, and not just the sound transmission factors in a condo, but how do you think about acoustics at a qualitative design-based level? And what we're talking about with that is thinking about the problem. We're getting him, like everybody else, to think about, well, that's this kind of solution. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's the part of architecture that you're concerned about, where everyday acoustics becomes a solution to that. One of our landscape architects is very interested in regenerative ecology, and actually took a technical diploma in that, and is now coming to do her DDES because she's interested in, well, how do I integrate that into my practice? I've got this specific skill set and I'm passionate about it, but how do I then start to strategize and talk about that as a value add to clients who may or may not see the value in that. So that's a particularly interesting one. And then we have another person who started out wanting to think about infill in established communities, and then because of what's been going on with COVID has shifted to start thinking about, multi-generational family space and the impact of working from home and how does one start to think about that in an innovative way from a residential perspective. I see that are the deliverables of your defense determined by your research, or are they defined elements? Well, it's kind of a mixture of both. There's an exhibition, so you have a wall that in the gallery that you so there's a gallery show for all of the graduating students when they're having their dissertation. So when you come to the symposium, and so you have a wall, and you can put whatever you want on that wall, and that's where the defense takes place. So you stand up there, and everybody sits around you, and the review panel, just like a final review in any other studio, and you speak to that, and you get an hour to present, and then there's an hour of questions. There is a written document that is there. It's a substantive written document, but it's a substantive document. Mm-hmm. How much of it is written is dependent on your project. This is a creative discipline. It's a creative approach, and so we're expecting that there are a lot of diagrams and drawings and images, and how much writing you do is very open-ended to the project. And then so the dissertation forms part of that, the exhibition is part of it, and then we record your presentation and the defense questions, and that forms part of your formal submission for the document for the degree. What you do inside that is completely up to you. In the RMIT model, some people built a kind of mock-up of an idea. It was a technical mass timber wood frame detailing thing and he actually had everybody sit inside that. It was a kind of performance art piece as well. Others show a progression of the projects that they completed during their dissertation that shows how those pieces have been applied and what they come out of it. Others are very diagrammatic and speak about the policy ones are much more written based.
Just to add to that, John, and hey, Johnny, good to see you again.
Johnny.
The one thing about that, the university has a requirement for a document of some kind. And as John says, we're really quite loose in terms of how we define that. The requirements for that final dissertation presentation is also something that you would discuss and establish with your supervisory committee. So it's not just you kind of come up with it, but there is an idea of how you're crafting your project and your research along, and that is also something discussed. And typically there's a kind of an agreement that, well, we'll have these kinds of gallery installations, these elements here, and the document. So it's not something that you're left alone with to determine. It's always developed within the situ of your cohort and with your supervisory committee. And then the other thing I think is also too, the program's really quite open to the research question that is raised. And so that idea of what is being presented is something that's very much emergent and emanates out of the research question as opposed to something that's imposed from without. So I think there's a certain integrity within that in terms of what gets presented in front of folks at that final defense.
Yeah, exactly. And actually in the fifth, or your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in your fifth symposium presentation, typically in the model that I went through, that's when you present your chapters and what you're proposing to, how you're proposing to exhibit that. And that's what you get feedback on in that last defense. So everybody gets a chance to talk about it. It's very much those symposia and the opportunity that you get to talk about your work in this open way. Like if you think about it, once you're in practice, you don't get a chance to do that very often, right? Like it's never, and you think about how great that was in school. So we really use those 6 sessions to do a lot of work. And you know, I participated in a review session last weekend. There's the University of Virginia Tech is Richard Blythe from RMIT has moved to Virginia Tech as the dean, and he started a program there. We're going to develop an exchange program where you might go to Virginia Tech if you felt like going to, which is just outside of Washington, if you felt like presenting your work there, and we'll invite some of their students to us as well to just build up that cohort. But you get an enormous amount of value out of sharing, even on Zoom, sharing all of your work together. And you can imagine, you know, you'll have a cohort of 7 to 10 people. You're going to move through that 3-year process with them, see them twice a year. They'll remember, as will your supervisor and others will remember what you're doing and say, hey, Johnny, you last time you were here, you were talking about this, but now you shifted gears, you know, why are you doing that? And you got to get called on stuff, and then people will say, you know what that makes me think of? It makes me think that maybe you should try that. And it's so valuable. And I found, like most people say, that there's a real sense of withdrawal when you finish, because it's so great to have. It's almost like therapy, right? You get this kind of group that you can talk about what's bothering you and what you're interested in. And that's why most people come back and start participating in the review panels, because they don't want to give it up. And some people postpone graduating, and they just, it's a bit, or say they want to do it twice. So I'm hoping that same thing will happen with our group as it matures. What's interesting is that, you know, we've got our first group and they're kind of blazing the trail. And then the second cohort that's coming in now will be kind of version 2 of that. We're going to be rejigging part of the first year courses in response to the feeling that we get. So, but you're still in these first 3-4 years are going to be critical to establishing the tenor and the spirit of this program, which we think has got a lot of potential to become a significant component of both the education and practice landscape of Canada. You know, if we start, doing this, we can all make a difference. We'll figure out how to make a difference, how to be more impactful. Would DDES students be encouraged? Eric, yes, absolutely. You know, certainly to present at industry conference, gather more feedback, promote ideas, absolutely. I mean, it all depends on the individual project. Some projects are developing something that's really proprietary, like this is an advantage to the way I'm going to practice. And so until you actually kind of have it out there at the end, you don't want to maybe, you know, let the cat out of the bag. So you may not be speaking too publicly until the very end. Others you might want to really be getting information about. And so then, yes, you would be doing that. And the goal of all of this, I mean, you know, you're here because you're a thoughtful practitioner. If you weren't a thoughtful practitioner interested in improving the quality of our discipline and changing the world, you would have seen that you can enhance, you know, transform your practice and tossed it out, right? The fact that you've taken an hour out of a busy day at this, you know, on a Wednesday morning means that you are already part of a group within our disciplines that cares about the world. And this is an opportunity. When you come out of this, you're going to be recognized with a doctoral degree that says you are an expert in this piece of what your world is. Whatever that is, you're an expert in that. You have authority to be able to speak to that. And that authority, you've also spent 6 years or 3 years, six semesters really thinking about it, honing it, being able to articulate it. And the RMIT experience in Australia has been that elevates people's practice because they know how to talk about their work in a way that is very compelling, as opposed to just, you know, well, this is our hourly rate and, you know, we do this and here's some pictures. They can really clearly articulate their value statement to clients and to the public. You can do that. And so, I mean, I've certainly leveraged that in my own career, being able to say, I am a recognized expert in age-in-place design. What I did is halfway through, I shifted from being interested in transforming houses for everybody to transforming houses so that they'd be more appropriate for seniors as they age. And that was okay. I could change my research proposal halfway through. But so, you know, and then you leverage that and being in the way in which you can speak to the public, speak to your clients, what you put on your CV. All of that's really important. And I think it's part of our obligation. How are we going to change the world? We can only change the world so much in our own practice, but if we can inspire others and show the generation of new knowledge to others and have them apply it, then that amplifies that message out in a big way.
Hi there, John.
Do you and Barry both supervise each student? No. So each of us, Barry, there are a series of supervisors that and it's a kind of within the school. Mark Boutin, Graham Livesey, and then there are landscape architects and planners and others within the architecture program, as well as Barry and I. And so we match a supervisor with the student. I have some students that I supervise, as does Barry. So really that's there. And what's important is that the role of the supervisor and the committee is to guide, right? You are the expert. You are the content expert in your field. You will not find a supervisor that knows more than you do. There might be some review panel people that we'll bring in that are more familiar and have a different take and can provide you with some critical information. But the role of the supervisor is to guide you through the process. It's a more process-oriented piece than, say, a traditional PhD where you're going to work with the Nobel chemist and because you're trying to learn that. This is it's a different philosophy and a different kind of strategy. So you want to have a supervisor that you can connect with, that you can relate to, that's familiar with this process and familiar enough with what you're doing that they can understand what you're talking about. But you're the content expert, and where you need to build up that content expertise in new areas, that's where, as we talked about earlier, you can find resources either, well, anywhere in the world, because if you're a doctoral student at the University of Calgary, you can pretty much phone up anybody, anywhere, and say, I'm doing a dissertation on this. Can I have a coffee with you? Can we have a meeting? Can we talk? And it opens up those doors in really great ways. Barry, do you want to speak about your expertise?
For sure. Basically, I'm an industrial designer and actually an alum of the industrial design program that once existed here at the U of C. I also have an undergraduate in architecture, but my research focus really hones in on design thinking and understanding, if you will, processes and approaches to design that facilitate a kind of richness within delivery of design. And most recently, I've been looking at design thinking approaches to enhance the adoption of technology within aging in place scenarios. And so that's been something that I've been working on with some people at the Ward of the 21st Century on campus and also other touch points across the campus. And you know, my own background in that, my own professional practice, I've actually done a lot of medical devices and consumer products and things along those lines. So there's I guess, background in that entrepreneurial thinking, background in design thinking, as well as in, I think, the transition of some of the theoretical ideas into practice. How do we make that resonate, and how do we make those types of things work within our approaches to practice? And then, John, there's a question from Tim. I noticed that there's a natural theme of researching space, materials, or physical things, elements in some of the research examples provided. Is there space for the DDES program to support non-space related disciplines, for example, user experience and service design, working on mostly digital products?
Good question. I'll answer and then you answer, Barry. I would say that there is the potential. It would be interesting to have a conversation about what your problem is. You know, if it's about user experience in a kind of abstract way, then probably there might be a different thing. If it's around, it depends what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and how that might relate to the built environment. Of course, I mean, the built environment is now a digital environment as well. And so I think as I'm sort of playing it out, I think there might be some really interesting things around that, particularly in the way in which the user experience becomes more pervasive, just more pervasive and less, okay, now I'm going to my laptop to do something. So I could see that could be very cool. Barry, you're the expert in this area.
I have
or more than me, that's for sure. You're more of an expert than me, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think there's some really, really interesting things that come out from this. So for instance, there's ideas around the environment as the user interface, as the point of user interface, right? So ubiquitous computing and that type of thing, which might relate to architecture or planning, urban design, that kind of thing. And there's some really interesting innovations in that particular area. And I think there's some design thinking aspects that could be applied to that, just in terms of understanding how the user experience could unfold within that, and how one's practice can support that. There's also some really, really interesting stuff around service design. And I think within the idea of city building and ideas on social equity and social innovation, there are some really interesting opportunities in that realm as well that could be fostered within the DDES.
Yep. We're just about out of time, but I noticed that Leanne had left had a message that came up earlier and that we missed on the chat. Do you have a maximum number of students for each cohort? Our target is eventually, when we're fully up and running, to have 15 students in each cohort. It'll take us a few years to get up to that. We want to start a little bit smaller so that we can test our model and work through the process with a couple of cohorts first. I think we had about 26, 27 applications. We accepted 10. And then we're at 7 because 3, for the unusual circumstances we're in right now, deferred. And so I would imagine it will be something similar. We've had a much more aggressive advertising campaign this year, and we've had a number of inquiries. So I think we'll probably have more, we certainly will have more applications this year than before. And so we'll try and hit that same 10, somewhere in that same 10 number, I would say. But we'll get up to 15 eventually. That's the size of a studio cohort in our school is 15. It's a nice number to get enough diversity, but not be too large that you don't get enough time for individual kinds of feedback. So I see we're just about finished. Are we finished? I don't see any other questions. Are we all good? Well, what I really want to thank everybody for coming. Please make sure that you, please make sure that if you have a question, if you just want to talk about it to see if it's an idea, please just set up an appointment with Jen and I'm very happy to meet with you. It might take a couple of weeks to get an appointment, but as you can probably tell, I'm passionate about this degree. I went through it. I was so excited when I graduated that I convinced the university to launch this degree. It's something that I think is going to be the flagship for our school, and I think that it has the potential to really make a difference. Not only in your lives, because I know that's going to happen because it happened with me, but also in the broader discipline and in society in general. So thank you very much for everything that for coming, and I hope to have a meeting with you and hopefully see you next September in our second cohort. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all. It was great to see some of you again, and again,
yeah, great to see some of our alumni. That's wonderful.
And absolutely
okay.
Open to meeting with people as well to augment John's offer.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
Bye now.